Started my first startup in '97. The world told me I was insane.
Our goal is creating future economies that are more regenerative and sustainable.
Something didn't match up. Why hasn't this become the next big thing? And that's where we invested.
The whole purpose of achieving anything in life is measurement.
It's my pleasure to introduce Abe Kruger. As co-founder and president of a leading national sustainability and healthy housing consulting firm, Abe leverages his 17 years of construction expertise to help clients make their projects as efficient, durable, sustainable, and healthy as possible. He co-authored his first textbook on residential green building and is a frequent contributor to leading industry publications and speaking events. His firm, SK Collaborative, has certified or is in the process of certifying over 50,000 single and multifamily units across the country, Mexico, US Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, under a diverse portfolio of sustainable and healthy building programs. Abe is an award-winning advocate for high-quality, affordable housing and has cultivated cross-sector collaborations to improving housing locally and regionally. Nationally, he serves on the board of directors of the Residential Energy Services Network, where he's a strong proponent of quality assurance and organizational transparency. So please join me in welcoming Abe Kruger from SK Collaborative. Thanks so much, Abe. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Ian. And if you can just give me 1 second, I want to make sure I can share my screen okay.
Yep, I can see that.
All right, and it's not in presenter mode, right?
Right, yep, I can see full screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Whenever I do these sorts of virtual presentations, it's always hard because you feel like you're just talking into the abyss. So please use the chat, use the Q&A, ask questions. My colleague, Sarah, is here with us. She's going to be monitoring that for me. But please use it. I always tell folks, you don't just hear me rambling on. Let's get a conversation going. So real quick, I'll tell you a little bit more about my firm. We're going to talk about healthy building assumptions, healthy building reality, the role of third-party verification. We're going to talk about green building and healthy building certifications. So first things first, SK Collaborative, like Ian said, we're green building and healthy housing consultants. That's the bulk of what we do. About 90% of our work is multifamily. Then the other 10% is single family, commercial, and communities. In multifamily, this is about an even split between market rate and affordable housing, and it's all over the country. If we can drive there and back, we do everything in-house. If it's Shreveport, Louisiana, or up in Indiana, or out in California, we tend to have a local partner who's our boots on the ground. But if you're a developer working in multiple regions, we're your one point of contact to help keep things simple. We also work on utility energy efficiency rebate programs, building enclosure work. So this is where we'll inspect flashing details, look at weather-resistant barriers. We have a spray rack to test windows and doors to make sure there's no water intrusion. The reason we're here today, healthy housing. So we're increasingly doing work there. We do some code compliance testing, and then we still get to do some technical writing from time to time. Our office is in Atlanta, technically Decatur, if you're familiar with the area. And from the map, you can see bulk of our work is in the Southeast, so we are happy to go anywhere from Mexico, Puerto Rico, you name it. I love asking folks, what do you think of when you hear the word healthy housing or a healthy building? And it tends to be things like vegetated buildings. So people talk about, oh, I saw this amazing picture of this building in Singapore that had trees on the balconies and vines growing up the outside. And that certainly can be one aspect of a healthy building. You can have vegetated walls inside the building or living walls. Indoor air quality monitors and air cleaners can also be part of a healthy building. But really, these are the final step. Really, a healthy building is about the fundamentals. So it is about simple steps like covering your ducts during construction. So over here, you can see this blue piece of tape covering up the duct. So part of our inspection process is making sure ducts are protected. Construction is very dirty. You get dust from sawdust, drywall dust. Ducts in the floor act as basically just trash receptacles. You have hunks of wood, you have empty tubes of caulk, you have bottles of pee. It's amazing the stuff you find inside ductwork. Protect it during construction. I don't care how many trees are growing on your balconies. If you've got filthy ducts, that building is not going to be healthy. We spent a lot of time looking at the insulation, making sure it was installed properly so that you have thermal comfort, so that the building is energy efficient, making sure it's properly air sealed. This is one of the areas where we've really grown our practices, building enclosure consulting. So making sure flashing details are done right on windows. If that building is not properly managing bulk water, so from rain, waters can get in, and that's where you end up with issues around microbial growth. If a building rots to the ground within 5 years, I don't care if it's a LEED Platinum, that's not a sustainable building. That's not a healthy building. We want to make sure that these buildings are durable, long-lasting structures. And here I'm showing a bath exhaust fan with a hard metal pipe exhaust and mastic ceiling. Okay, you might ask, what's this all about? It's really common for us to inspect bath exhaust fans and to measure the flow rate. So it might be rated at 80 CFM or even 100 CFM. And when we put our flow hood over top of it, we find that it's moving 0 CFM, sometimes 10 CFM. And that reduction is because the duct is either poorly run, so it's got little curly cues, it's just going a long distance, it's getting compressed. A lot of times the exhaust comes out on one side and then it has to do a 180 to run to where the actual soffit is. So these are the details that you have to get right. So 90% of a healthy building is really in these fundamentals. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And don't worry, we're going to get to talk about the flashy stuff a little bit too. All right, so to back up, I like to use this as kind of a way to frame the issue, to frame the conversation, and we're going to that 30,000 foot level. So housing impacts your health really through 4 different pathways. Okay, the first is stability or instability. I think we can all agree that intuitively we understand that if you're experiencing homelessness, that's going to negatively impact your health. Okay, just the act of being unstable in your housing, so not knowing if you might be evicted, not knowing if you're going to be able to make your rent or not, having to frequently move from one house to another, that instability negatively impacts your health. It impacts your health through stress. It impacts your health through just additional costs. If you have kids, you're moving them from school to school to school. Okay, that instability negatively impacts health. We're going to talk about a little bit, but not too much. Where our focus is going to be quality and safety. So this is referring to, the indoor air quality within that home. Is there mold? Is there moisture? Are there pollutants inside that house? Is there carbon monoxide in the home from backdrafting gas appliances? Safety also encompasses things like trips and falls, fire hazards, electrical hazards. We're not going to get into that today. Next is affordability. When we talk about affordable housing, obviously is the rent affordable or is the mortgage payment affordable? But it's also, are the utilities affordable? Is this home affordable to operate? So we're looking at water, energy bills. We're definitely touching on that. Affordability also gets at health costs and transportation costs. Next is neighborhood. Where is that home located? Again, I think we all kind of understand that if that house is near grocery stores, or if it's in a food desert, if it's near public transit, if it's near green space, all those things positively impact your health. But if it's in an area of high crime, that can have negative impacts. So again, today the focus is on quality and safety, and we're going to be touching a little bit on stability and affordability. All right, so 30,000 feet level, zooming in. Now let's talk about the physical structure of the house. I don't know if folks are familiar with Professor Joe Allen and John Maycomer's book, Healthy Buildings, but it's the book to understand healthy commercial buildings. They touch on residential, they touch on multifamily, but its focus is really on commercial buildings. But with that said, it's great. You have Joe Allen, public health background. He really dives into the literature around health impacts of buildings. And John, comes from a multi-generational family of general contractors in Boston. And so he's really presenting the business case for why, as a business owner, you would want your employees in a healthy building. They also lay out why, as a property owner, you would want your building to be healthy for your tenants. So it's a really interesting and fun read. They came up with this concept of the nine foundations of a healthy building. Okay, and this is going to be the focus today. We're going to be breaking down air quality, thermal health, moisture, dust and pests, safety and security. Again, we're going to touch on that a little bit, but not much. Water quality. We're not going to be talking about that too much, but a little bit. Noise, lighting, views, ventilation. What's interesting looking at this list, these are going to be impacted by early in the design process decisions. Excuse me. These are going to be impacted throughout construction as well. So when we thinking back to those pictures I showed of insulation, installation, and air sealing, that impacts thermal health, that impacts air quality. All right.
And Abe,
First
we have
bit of,
sorry,
yes,
we have our first question.
Right.
And I think that you're going to get to this later on, so I'll let you decide if you want to answer now or later. But what incentives are available for green building certifications, and how would one go about discovering these?
Excellent question. So we do touch on this a little bit. And so what I'll say is why do our clients do this? Let's start there. So if they're affordable housing, which is about 50% of our clients, usually the low-income housing tax credits, which are awarded at the state level, require or incentivize green building. So that's kind of one driver. Another is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and HUD all have green loans now for multifamily properties. And they tend to have preferred interest rates, so basis point reductions, or they have HUD has an MIP, mortgage insurance premium reduction program as well. So you're paying less on your mortgage insurance premium. Those are all big drivers, I would say. One good website is Desire.USA. I'd have to look. If you send me an email, my email's at the end, I can send you the website. It's a great resource for finding utility rebates. So some of our clients are just saying, hey, Georgia Power is offering X number of dollars per unit for us to get it certified. So utility rebates can be a big driver as well.
And one more. How should accessibility factors be factored into building health assessment in terms of the 9 foundations? Is this a safety and security issue?
That's a good question. So accessibility kind of falls under safety and security, I would say, yes. And it's also somewhat like in terms of just simple like ADA accessibility issues, that tends to not be elevated probably as prominently as it should be, but I would put it under safety and security. Yeah, good question. Any more? Cool.
That's it for now.
The way this is working for me is I actually can't see the hop-in screen. So I just see my own PowerPoint. So I'm sorry, I can't see your chats or see Sarah popping in. So there's the building enclosure. This is the outer structure of the building, okay? And this is what's keeping the outside out, inside in, okay? For lack of a better term. And really, from our point of view, we spend a lot of time looking at how does the enclosure do or how is it performing at keeping moisture out? And really, this is all about control. You've got to be able to control temperature, air movement, moisture movement. Once you can control those factors in a building, then you can make it healthy. Otherwise, the steps you take to make a healthy building, you're going to be constantly fighting with a poorly installed envelope, poor insulation, big gaps in your envelope. All right. So you got to get the fundamentals right. You got to have control over your space. In multifamily, we then kind of zoom in at the unit level and we talk about unit compartmentalization. So the idea being that each unit should be its own, basically freestanding house or its own little island. And I think we can understand that, when your neighbor is cooking fish, you don't want to smell it. You don't want to be breathing that. When your neighbor is smoking, you don't want to be breathing that. So we want to make sure that each unit is fully compartmentalized. It's also not just from the neighbors, it might be from a shared hallway, from an elevator shaft, from a trash chute, from a parking garage. There's lots of conditions around a unit that you want to make sure you are isolated from. And when we talk about building envelope, the two components that are key are insulation and air sealing. We need to make sure these are complete and in contact with one another. So when you're using fiberglass bats or anything air pervious, meaning air can go through it, so rock wool, fiberglass, that bat needs to be installed and enclosed on all 6 sides. So if we take a typical exterior wall, you have drywall on the interior, a stud, top plate, bottom plate, and then your exterior sheeting. Where we run into issues is when you have chases, when you've got double walls. And those are scenarios where sometimes that backside air barrier is missing. So a lot of our job is marking up plans, identifying areas where you've got these conditions where here's a trash chute, okay? Here's your living unit. Is this wall getting fully insulated? Is there air sealing at the top and bottom? Is there a trash liner? In single family, simply identifying the building envelope can be tricky. And so we talk to architects about doing what's called the pen test. You simply take your hand and a pen, put it on the plans, and then draw the building envelope. Just trace it. And if you can do it without lifting up the pen, that's a great, good start. Next, you want to make sure, okay, so insulation and air sealing all along here. Are the two in contact? Are there any gaps? Are there any holes? So in this example, this knee wall would be the potential problem area. Commonly, there's just a fiberglass bat in there. In Georgia and in other states, energy code requires that if it's an air pervious material, again like fiberglass or rock wool, it needs to have backside air barrier. So you need to pre-rock or put OSB, plywood. You need to put something rigid on the backside of that wall for this to be a complete building envelope. Sometimes our conversation is, where do we want the building envelope? So if you've got your ductwork and HVAC up in the attic, it might be more advantageous to do spray foam along this roof line so that you can get your HVAC inside the building envelope, inside conditioned space, or at least semi-conditioned space. Think of a Georgia attic. Summertime, it can easily be 130, 140 degrees. I don't care how high efficient that HVAC system is. If it's sitting up there in that blast furnace, it's not going to perform well. I don't care if it's got a HEPA filter or UV filter. If it's sitting up in a 140 degree attic, it's not going to be performing efficiently. And so that's going to have a negative impact. All right, so how do we do this? What's the process here? How do we ensure all these little details are done right? You need a framework. You need some sort of structure for doing this. Green building programs are the best way. And there's also healthy building programs as well. So nationally, the big green building programs are going to be National Green Building Standard from Home Innovation, which is actually the sister company to the National Association of Home Builders. So the NAHB, which is the Professional Association of Home Builders, they've got their research labs and they created the National Green Building Standard. So it really came out of the home building industry. So in many ways, it's pretty builder friendly because of that. Then you have the U.S. Green Building Council's Lead for Homes program, and you have Enterprise Green Communities. Enterprise exclusively works with affordable housing. So you can only do Enterprise Green Communities if your development is affordable. Then we have programs like Energy Star, which is not really a green building program. Its focus is energy efficiency and durability. You have Passive House and Living Building Challenge. We also have local and regional programs. So depending on where you are in the country, you might have kind of a home team. So in the Southeast, we've got Earthcraft. Florida, there's the Florida Green Building Program. Austin has their own program. North Carolina has their own program. At the end of the day, all the programs are very similar. And the key is going to be that third-party verification. Here are kind of the general categories or core concepts of green building programs. So LEED calls these slightly differently than National Green Building Standard from Earthcraft, but it can all be kind of boiled down and grouped as followed. So energy efficiency, that obviously impacts utility bills, that impacts indoor air quality as well, because to create good indoor air quality, you need to have an energy efficient envelope. You need to make sure you have control over your indoor air quality. Site selection, this is again kind of going back to neighborhood. So where is this house located? Resource efficiency, this is mostly looking at the materials going into the building. So part of this is going to be, is it something that has recycled content? Is it an engineered wood product? Is it using a preferred material that's maybe rapidly renewable like bamboo? Water efficiency, most green building programs don't really dive into water quality the same way that some of the healthy housing programs do. And then operations and maintenance. This is, you've given the homeowner or the resident this amazing apartment, this amazing home. Well, you then have to teach them how to operate it efficiently and effectively. So things like, how do you set the thermostat? How do you use the bath exhaust fans? When you're cooking, use the range hood. When do filters need to be replaced? Things like that. So there's a lot of homeowner or resident education that comes along with this as well.
And Abe, we have a question that I think is a good one to answer right on the heels of green building programs. The definition of building health has changed over time. Asbestos was fine, and then it was seen as a danger. How should emerging and controversial health issues such as mold or EMF toxicity be addressed?
Good question. So, I think one interesting thing is to kind of acknowledge, well, why did we end up using asbestos everywhere? It's because it didn't burn. It's an incredible, long-lasting, durable material that doesn't really burn, doesn't really rot. So it was great as siding, roofing tiles, kitchen floor tiles, and we just used it all over the place. We then realized that when it becomes airborne, it's very harmful to our lungs. Likewise, lead had many benefits as well. That's why we used it in paint. And then we realized, oh, when you ingest it or breathe it, it's very toxic. I do think that there are some building materials that are kind of on people's radar as something to watch. But I also think that we're now much more aware of those sorts of concerns. And there's now environmental declarations. So we're getting manufacturers' reports so that we have a better understanding of what actually is in these materials going into our homes. With that said, there are certainly groups out there looking at this and saying we're not doing enough. And I would say certainly there's different paints, there's glues, finishes, adhesives, things that there are concerns around. But I think it's just, we need to do more research.
And I think it's an iterative process too. Even these green building programs we're discussing are in somewhat constant evolution. So the buildings that we certify have different versions over time. So I think, continue to change as we learn more.
I think that's a great point. And I also think that we're seeing building products rapidly adapt and change as well. So I'll give the example of blowing agents and spray foams. Those have been changing because of the global warming potential. So Not quite an immediate health concern, but a global health concern for sure because of climate change.
Thank you.
Yeah. For certification, there's really two pathways you can take. The first is green from the start. And so I love it when project teams, when developers, when clients ask me, hey, how early should I bring you in? And my answer is always now. It is never too early to bring in to the design process your third-party verifier, your green building consultant, your healthy housing consultant. It's never too early. I'm going to butcher this quote, but there's an architect in Austin, Texas, Peter Pfeiffer, and he likes to say that 90% of all cost decisions in a project, 90% of all energy usage of a project are calculated or locked in the first 10% of the design process. Let me say that one more time. 90% of your energy use is going to be decided by the first 10% of your design decisions. So this is things like orientation of the building. Do you have conditioned or unconditioned corridors? Where's your HVAC going? Is it going up in a hot attic, or are you going to do drop ceilings? Or are you going to go with ductless mini splits? These are all essential questions that it's never too early to start talking about. Have these conversations before those plans get so far along when it all of a sudden there's costs to redraw the project. So we don't want to get into a redesign part of it. So it's never too early. And it's about assembling the team. So it's not just owner and your green guy. It is owner, the green building consultants. It's the architect. It's the MEP, the mechanical engineers. It's if you know who your framer is going to be, bring in the framer. If you know who your GC is going to be, bring in your GC so that we can have these conversations. Another term for those early conversations is a design charrette, where it's a half day or a day long process where you really talk through all facets of the project and you can identify, how do you optimize this? And a lot of things what you're doing are coming up with the most cost effective solutions to achieve your goals. The flip side to that, and unfortunately we get involved in these projects too, is greening up, where we get the call, hey, slabs poured, we're going vertical, we need to get this thing green certified. And it's like, geez, okay. We can, 9 times out of 10, we can do it, but it's going to be painful and expensive oftentimes because a lot of the easy decisions are no longer available. So you end up getting into situations where you're just buying points or you're having to throw money at the problem to get to your certification. And that's not what we want to do. Roughly, here's the certification process. So step 1 is really identify the project goals. All right, so why are you doing this? Is it your funder wants this? Is it you need it for your tax credits? Is it you just want to check a box? All of those are perfectly fine reasons. I'm not going to judge you for your motives. We just want to understand kind of what's your goal. Is it you want to be the best and you want to have a plaque by your front door and this is going to be part of your marketing? Well, if that's the case, we might pick one program and not another program. If it truly is, you just want to get that piece of paper or a plaque as cheaply as possible, we can direct you in a different direction. So we need to understand the goals and motives so we can select a program. We then score the project. All programs have lots of different options for points. They're all based on point system. And so we get to pick and choose. We certainly have those projects where, the GC is sitting there literally putting a dollar value or dollar cost on every point. And guess what? That's perfectly fine. That's a great way to approach this because all the programs are well designed, right? They're intentional about how they award points. And so at the end of the day, it balances out so that you still get a holistic, good performing building. There's then inspections, documentation, testing, there's fees, nothing's free. And the key differences are going to be the administrative process and testing. Those tend to be the big things. So LEED for homes, for example, it is no secret. It is very admin intensive. There's a lot of documentation you have to compile for LEED, far greater than for National Green Building Standard. It's just kind of a reality. So our costs tend to be higher for LEED because of all that additional documentation. And then for testing, for green building programs, what we're talking about is the blower door test, which is up here. So this is a big fan and a red tarp you install in your doorway. And we do this at the unit level in multifamily. So this is going to tell us how well compartmentalized that unit is. LEED, Enterprise, and Energy Star, they require it. They also require duct leakage testing. For NGBS, it's optional if it's over 3 stories. More and more jurisdictions, this is required for code. So sometimes you got to do it regardless. Next is whole house ventilation. So programs point to what's called ASHRAE 62.2. Sometimes you hear this called fresh air. So outside air. It's required that you follow ASHRAE 62.2 for LEED, Enterprise, Energy Star. And there's flow testing requirements. So this is where we go back to my bath exhaust photos of making sure that the system that was installed is going to actually perform properly. It's conditional under NGBS, so you don't always need to have it. Spot ventilation is required in kitchens and baths for LEED, Enterprise, Energy Star. And this is exhausted to the exterior. So not just a recirc hood. So you can't do a kitchen exhaust where it just blows it right back into your forehead. It actually has to be exhausted to the outside. And then NGBS only requires bath exhaust, which honestly is why some of our projects go that route. Is they say, you know, shoot, over 100 units, I've got electric cooktops. To run my range to the exterior, that adds costs. You need to have a fire damper, et cetera, et cetera. And so that might be why they choose NGBS instead of LEED. All right, here are just some photos from the field showing things that we run into. Again, why that verification is so important. You know, I'm not trying to just like badmouth trades and subcontractors, okay? The idea here is, you know, trust but verify. You know, I like to think people are going to do a good job. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. So over here, this is called an energy recovery ventilator, an ERV. This is actually my personal house. And so what an ERV does, and this is a spot ERV from Panasonic. It sits in your ceiling and it looks like a big bath exhaust fan. And so one of these ducts is pulling air from the house and exhausting to the outside. The other is bringing in outside air. Inside the ERV is an enthalpy wheel. This is a magic box. So in the summertime, as your cool, relatively dry air is getting exhausted, that relatively warm, humid air is coming in, and then this enthalpy wheel is going to help to dehumidify and precondition the incoming air. That way, when you stand under here, that 30, 40 CFM of air doesn't feel significantly different than what's the rest of the house. Is it air conditioned? No. Is it heated? No. But it's tempered. What I'm really showing you here is a metal pipe wrapped in bubble wrap insulation. Okay, straight run, insulated. You're not going to have any risk of condensation on here. And we were able to measure the flow, and it performed as designed. Over here is a unit called QFresh, and the duct is coming down, making this hard bend, going up, oops, making a gnarly turn, and this was not performing as designed. And so that's where kind of measurement and verification comes into play. Over here, I'm showing a mechanical ventilation intake. Here is your dryer exhaust. All right, so is there a chance that as you're pulling in your fresh air, you're also pulling in your drier air? Certainly. It's also pretty darn close to the outdoor condenser, which in the summertime is kicking off a lot of heat. Some of that is likely to be captured here. And so are these issues that code officials are going to catch? Probably not. Over here is your intake and then your furnace exhaust. So this is a high efficiency furnace with a PVC pipe exhaust. You know, are the odds that this is going to be drawing that in? Probably not. Is that still a little close for comfort? Certainly. On the left is another ERV, and this one is a four pipe, is what it's commonly called. So there's one exhaust to the outside, one intake from the outside, one return from the inside, and then one supply to the inside. And they just literally got it ass backwards. And you know, it's one of those where we're like standing around looking at it, and there's little arrows labeled on the box, and the supply was going to the return was going to the supply. They set it backwards. And then over here is the intake where they had the damper just sealed shut. So I would say when we flow test bath exhaust fans, 25% of the time to about a third of the time, the damper, there's usually a little screw to hold it in place during shipping. Sometimes it's a piece of tape, but it's left in place. So when we flow test it, it's literally 0 CFM. And that might be an 80 or 100 CFM Energy Star bath exhaust fan, and it's pulling 0 because the damper is stuck shut. So again, that's where measurement verification comes into play, is I don't care if you have a UV filter, if you've got a fancy Nest thermostat, if you've got indoor air quality cleaners, IAQ monitors, if your bath exhaust doesn't pull in air, you know, you're going to have moisture issues in that bathroom. You're probably going to have mold and mildew issues in that bathroom. Over here is another bath exhaust fan, just showing that flex duct. There's only one exhaust port on most models, and the way the mounting brackets are, oftentimes this thing is just installed in the opposite direction of where you want to exhaust. And then even in best case scenario, you end up with these big long runs. Okay, this is another ventilation system that just was never plugged in. You know, did a code official catch this? No. You know, we go to flow test it and they're like, there's no flow. Well, it was never plugged in. All right, moisture management is another area where verification is key. So this is looking at the house wrap, making sure windows and doors are properly flashed. Any penetrations through that wall is flashed and sealed. We're looking at, you know, products like Zip, where that tape needs to be rolled to make sure there's no fish mouthing. So there's these bubbles and gaps that form. And it's a simple thing. You know, you're supposed to clean the surface, get any dust and debris off, put the tape on, and then just roll it. They've got little rollers that have a Z so that when you have to push it just enough to leave this indent. All the time we find problems with the Zip installation. Here's our spray rack where we're actually spraying water on the window. One of the most common things we find is manufacturer defects, where it's just bad windows came off the assembly line. And so you had to pull the windows and send them back to the manufacturer. Is that a pain for the general contractor? Oh yeah. Is it better to catch this during construction than later on once it's occupied and there's a heavy rainstorm? Definitely. More and more lenders are requiring this as well, especially around Atlanta. And I know other markets where there's been a lot of condos and apartments with window leak issues, especially with synthetic stucco. Insulation, we're making sure it was installed properly. Okay, if you're not installing it properly, meaning cutting it left and right, top and bottom, not compressing it, splitting it around wires, you got to do this for it to give you the comfort you want, the energy efficiency you want, and to give you the sound transmittance that you want. All right, so green building programs offer robust on-site verification. They take a holistic approach to the building. Then we have programs like Fitwell and Well. So Fitwell comes from the Center for Active Design out of New York. They've got over 1,000 projects certified or in the works, a bunch of registered projects, and they're in over 40 countries. Fitwell takes a holistic approach at occupant health. And a lot of what they're looking at is how do you encourage healthy living and healthy activities? So everything from vending machines and snack bars, so like more of a commercial building issue, to where is it located, the neighborhood, building access, outdoor space, indoor environment. Fitwel is gaining a lot of traction in multifamily because Fannie Mae has a rewards program, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But here's a project here in Atlanta called Monty Place. If you're familiar with Atlanta, it's in the Edgewood neighborhood. 100% of the units are affordable at 60% AMI or below. For folks not familiar, that's area median income, and this is pretty deeply affordable. There's community gardens, benches, picnic tables, a playground, indoor fitness. So there's lots of things here that are encouraging active living and healthy habits. We also certified it as green building as well. So it really kind of, you layered the two. And I would say, you can achieve all of this with a green building program using LEED, using NGBS. You can do this. But sometimes it's easier just to do both. And Fannie Mae right now only recognizes Fitwel. So that's part of the reason why we see a lot of interest in it for the Healthy Housing Rewards Program. There are two pathways. One pathway gets you up to a 50 basis point reduction. That's using Fitwel, and that's called the design pathway. There's then also an option where you have additional on-site services, and that will get you up to a 30 basis point reduction. Monty Place used Fitwel. Fannie Mae actually put out a little case study on the project. So I recommend folks going and checking it out. In addition to the basis point reduction, one of the carrots is water and energy savings can be underwritten. You also can roll into or Fannie Mae rather covers the cost of the Fitwel certification. They cover the cost of an energy and water audit. So for like a rehab project. So there's a lot of great reasons to use Fitwel if you're open to using a Fannie Mae loan. Next, we have Well. Well takes a very different approach from Fitwel. And Well has gained a lot of traction amongst corporate headquarters. So here in Atlanta, NCR, when they built their very nice gleaming high-rise a couple of years ago, they used Well. So more and more of those corporate headquarters, Well is the darling right now. And what's neat about Well is, so they're taking a comprehensive approach, but it is performance-based. So where with green building programs, the emphasis is on making sure your ductwork is nice and tight through duct leakage testing, making sure your envelope is nice and tight through the blower door test. Well, you get to test all sorts of things. So there's actual air quality testing. Well puts less of an emphasis on kind of how you get to good air quality, and more of an emphasis on, well, did you do it or not? It's the whole, like, the proof is in the pudding. So they actually make you do air quality testing. They also make you do water quality testing to make sure that the water quality is good. There's light testing, okay? Looking at, do you have good daylighting? There's comfort testing. So this is looking at temperature, mean radiant temperature. Mean radiant temperature is the temperature of the surfaces around you. So I like to give the example of, I live in a 1920s bungalow. Some walls we gutted and insulated, some walls we did not. Our living room is completely uninsulated, just original plaster. In the winter, in the living room, you feel much colder than you do in other areas of the house where the walls have been insulated. And it's because in that living room, the temperature is still going to be 72, 74 degrees, wherever we have it set. But the walls are very cold. They're going to be like 50, 60 degrees. Whereas in the rest of the house where the walls are insulated, they're much warmer. So you don't feel as cold. So mean radiant temperature is part of this, and then relative humidity. And then acoustics are the other area. So again, where the green building programs would put an emphasis on making sure you're installing the bats well, the visual verification well says, you know what, come back at the end and test. In multifamily, you have to be 5 units or more. It can be apartments, condos, or townhomes, which is kind of interesting. It can be market rate, it can be affordable. You have to do the well certification pathway. You can't do the core and shell. And then you don't have to do performance testing unless you're going for gold or platinum. I will say I'm on a working group with Well right now, looking at residential, because I think they realize the Well program is really designed for commercial office. And so it doesn't work that well, no pun intended, for for multifamily projects. So that's on their radar as something to go after. It also has a reputation, justifiably, of being really expensive. The one exception to that is all projects using Enterprise Green Communities version 2020 get co-certified. So they're automatically well certified. And part of that partnership was for Well to better understand multifamily projects. So if you have an affordable development and you're interested in Well certification, do green building, do Enterprise Green Communities, as you'll get your Well certification for free. All right, so once you get those fundamentals right, that's when we get to talk about the fun stuff, right? So I've got developers, I've got clients all the time like, all right, I get it. Insulation's important, air sealing's important, good, clean, straight ductwork is important, but residents don't care. Like, that's not sexy. How do I sell that? I can sell a Nest thermostat. And that's the unfortunate reality. So what I say is, get those fundamentals right, and you're 90%, 95% of the way there to a healthy building. This stuff is the cherry on top, right? This is that last step. You don't want to rely on a filter to get you to good indoor air quality. You want to make sure that you don't have pollutants in that space, one, or if there are pollutants from cooking or from the bath, you're exhausting them at the source as effectively as possible so that those pollutants aren't all throughout the unit and you need to have a good filter. Here are some additional resources. So I mentioned Fannie Mae's program, there's Fitwell, there's Well. Here's my contact info. Please feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions. This is one of those where there are whole sections in here. I would love to spend multiple hours doing deep dives. So this is a bit high level. And Amelia, I went a little fast, so please reach out if you have any questions. Sarah, do we have any more in the chat right now? Otherwise,
no, I think we covered all of them as they came. So yeah, thank you, Abe.
Awesome. Well, I know it is a busy day of sessions, so I will give you back the next 8 minutes to everybody. I'll put in a plug at 3 o'clock. I'm talking with Pam Fitzpatrick from OneTrust about ESG reporting and why a lot of our clients, developers, are, I should have mentioned that, part of why they do green building is to check a box in their ESG reporting. So environmental, social, governance reporting. So I invite everyone to join me for that as well at 3 o'clock. But thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Abe. Thank you, Sarah, so much for this session. It was highly informative. Were we able to get all the questions answered in the chat and the Q&A?
Yep. Looks like we answered them all.
Awesome. Great. Well, yeah, with that, we've got about 7 minutes to go. So we can give you guys back 7 minutes. And again, as a reminder, Abe and Pam Fitzpatrick are going to be having a session immediately following this. So you guys feel free to join. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Take care.